this study because I have an interest in the topic. So one of the first Cochrane reviews was one that my group did in 2018. That review was called The Development of Type 2 Diabetes in People with Intermediate Hyperglycemia, which is also known as prediabetes. And back then, in 2018, well, I already started the search in 2017, I struggled very much with the methods, and I couldn't find good methods on information retrieval for prognosis studies. And ever since then, we have seen some more publications on this topic. And what this author team did, I'm not sure how to pronounce her last name. Does anyone have any clues? She's Canadian.
I would
Boulos?
say Boulos. That's my guess.
Okay. Okay, so I'll call her Boulos. So
Okay.
Leah Boulos et al. They did investigate a Cochrane review as well. So Jill Hayden conducted one of the other first Cochrane reviews on prognosis, and her review focused on the association between recovery expectations and disability outcomes in adults with low back pain. And this is a prognostic factor review. And the review my group conducted and I was involved with is an overall prognosis review. And I think before we start focusing on this paper, we could clarify the 4 types of prognosis reviews or prognosis studies that are available or that have been classified so far. And if you want to dive deeper into this, I can really recommend the new Cochrane Interactive Learning Module Systematic Review of Prognosis Studies, which is available to Cochrane members. And they find 4 types of prognosis reviews that can be done. And Boulos also shortly describes them in this paper. So just to give us an overview again about the 4 different types. So you can either conduct a review on overall prognosis, or you conduct a review on prognostic factors, or a review on prognostic models or predictive models. And the 4th review type I didn't know of yet is review on predictors of treatment effects. And apparently this last review type is a mix between intervention and prognosis studies, because they require information from RCTs. So I think if anyone of us is ever going to support a review, it's probably going to be one of the first of the 2 first ones mentioned. So that's the overall prognosis or the prognostic factor review. And this paper here focuses on a prognostic factor review. Okay. And just to give a quick definition of this, the module says prognostic factors are studies aimed at investigating which factors predict or are associated with certain outcomes occurring during a certain time period in individuals within a certain health state. Ideally, these studies address the independent prognostic ability of a factor adjusted for other prognostic factors rather than the univariable association of a prognostic factor. So always prognostic factors compared among themselves. For example, we might be interested in studying the prognostic value of anti-cholinergic burden for prediction of dementia in older adults with no known cognitive syndrome. Okay, so that's the definition of prognostic factors. And in this case, I already mentioned, this seems to me to be a rehabilitation topic, the review by Hayden et al. And the original review used a focused electronic database search and extensive supplementary search methods. And the objective of this paper that we're going to talk about now was to retrospectively assess the search methods used in this review. And I have to say, I'm a big fan of this paper. I think it's extremely well conducted, well reported, and yeah, so very, very nice publication. Also very nice graphics in there, which help understanding what they actually did. Okay, so let's quickly, I'll try to get up, yeah. So let's quickly summarize what they did in the methods section. Or am I moving too quickly? Maybe just from the introduction, some very important points. So searching for these kind of review types is very difficult because none of the classical search approaches are enough. So you have to really use different methods, and especially the supplementary search methods seem to be playing a very important role for prognosis reviews or prognostic factor reviews. For the rest of this call, I think I'm just going to say prognosis reviews. Okay. So what they did in this paper is they used 4 approaches to assess the aspects of systematic searching for prognostic factor studies. So first of all, they compared the search recall of a broad search versus a focused electronic search. And the difference between the focused search and the broad search is that, so the search is constructed as low back pain, and the second search block is a prognosis filter, and the third search block are the outcomes, so the recovery expectations. And this is the narrow search, so the focused search, and they compare it with a recall of a broader search, and this broader search is just made up of the first 2 search blocks, so low back pain and the prognosis filter, without the recovery expectations part. So that's the first approach they wanted to investigate. The second approach is they wanted to see where the origin of the eligible studies was. So which search methods led to the identification of the studies that were finally included. And of course, we all know this paper is describing everything retrospectively. So this is the standard procedure apparently in information retrieval evaluations. So basically what they did, or what they wanted to do, is find where the eligible studies were sourced by. Not talking about databases this time, but talking about the methods that helped identify these studies. And they focused on, actually the whole paper is focused on everything included in Medline. So I didn't check the original review. I guess because it's a Cochrane review, they had to use other databases than Medline, but this whole small investigation on information retrieval methods focuses on Medline, and I can absolutely see why they wanted to focus it on one database only. Okay, but this is also a limitation of the paper, which they didn't mention. Okay, next approach. In addition to the 2 approaches already mentioned, they wanted to focus on checking whether the supplementary search methods retrieved studies that no, I have to rephrase this again. So what they did is check whether studies identified via the supplementary search methods would make a difference if taken out from the meta-analysis they conducted. So basically, they redid the meta-analysis and excluded the studies that were only identified via the supplementary search methods. And they wanted to check, did the meta-analysis come to different conclusions? And last but not least, they wanted to analyze the performance of the prognosis filters. And the original review used a prognosis filter by Irvine, which I wasn't aware of. And they compared this Irvine filter against one of the Hedges team's prognosis filters, the optimized version, and another one that I wasn't aware of, which is a publication, I think by Parker, and they call that filter inclusive general filter. And this publication apparently also reported on a second filter, and this filter is called combined Hedges in natural history filter. Okay. So that's what they wanted to do. And I think what is worth mentioning is that they didn't only use the 60 finally included studies in the Hayden review as a reference set for that, but they said they wanted to be more inclusive, so they went up, or they they didn't use the final set of included reviews, but a broader search set, which was the set, I interpreted it this way, that the researchers screened originally. So probably those records that were included in the review after title abstract screening. That's the way I interpreted it, but I'm happy to discuss this later on. Okay, should we go on, or should we at this point already allow some questions or some remarks on the methods they used? Robin, what do you think?
Does anyone have any questions? I do want to go back to that point because I'm really unclear what they did here for their reference standards. I'm reading this section between expand our reference standard beyond the 60 studies included in the final stage.
Yeah.
And then, so I assume they took the results before screening. Is that what you're thinking too, Marie-Angie?
So in the results section, they say the reference standard drawn from the first stage of screening in the original review contained 272 citations. So what is the first stage of screening in the original review? Is that's even before title abstract screening? But that seems to be a ridiculously low number.
That's not, yeah. It's got to be their second stage full text screening, I would think.
I would think so too. Okay. What do others think?
Yeah, well, I would assume that it's the full, well, the abstract review includes, presumably, so the things they screened in full text.
Yeah. So we actually don't know. We would probably have to dive into the supplementary material to find out, but the agreement here in the virtual room seems to be that this can't be the number of identified studies. Yeah,
I think that's a fair assumption. Any other questions about the methods too before we go on? I found this comparison of the hedges, these filters, really interesting. One, like you, Maria and T, I wasn't familiar with some of these, and two, how different they were as well. It just suggested to me, or it supported the experience that we've had working on prognosis, all the 4 types of prognosis reviews, is how challenging they are. And I think that's reflected in the filters. I don't know if you felt that too.
Yeah, I would have actually liked to see different variants of the hedges filter included in this assessment, because they just use the optimized version. But of course, the hedges teams always develop several filter variants. And in the review that I supported, I used different filter variants by the hedges team. So they just picked one of those types, whereas from the other reference, the Parker reference, they apparently used 2 filter variants that were presented in the same publication, so the inclusive general and combined hedges natural history. But then again, I can understand, obviously, that at some point you have to draw the line, but yeah, that's something that I would have liked to see another hedges team filter.
It looks like they provide in the supplementary data the PM IDs, at least for the included studies. So you could actually just test the other filters against it.
Oh, thanks.
Oh,
great.
Yeah, we could just do that analysis ourselves.
No, I mean, Maria Inti is right that it's a very interesting question, and so it's nice to find that they have at least provided enough information to just like do it yourself if that's what you're really interested in.
Great.
Absolutely. Thank you, Emma. And I think this also speaks for the quality of this paper, that they present this data and that can be reused for people like me who want to test another filter. Okay, thank you for looking that up.
I really liked how they laid out the filters. I think this is a really great paper, and the way that they've done it in table 1, so you can just cross compare. It's fascinating just looking at, as you said, the differences between them. They are markedly different filters, aren't they?
Oh, yeah.
So that's a really lovely thing, because it really speaks to the difficulties in this and searching for diagnostics as well.
It's very interesting that Robin and Chris both say they are markedly different, because the authors of this paper say they are very similar. So that's an interesting different assessment of these filters. So they find them similar because they include similar terms, but and I would agree. Of course, some terms are included everywhere, but sometimes they're just included as subject headings, and in other times they're included as title abstract words. So yeah. And I agree, Chris, and thank you for for mentioning this, that it's really nice that they just didn't only present the citations for these filters, but they actually display the filters as they are, which really helps to assess them. Yeah, Robin.
Oh, I was going to agree to a point. They do share some terms, and like you said, like the instance of prognosis, where we see it, in one instance it's a text word, and in another they've got it as here is a subject heading. That's more common, but I mean the term death only appears in one. There are the first episode, things like that. There's definite variety in here. Natural history is appearing in both of these, but not in the other two. So I would push back on saying that they're similar. I would say they have some similarities, but are pretty different overall.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so they think they're similar. You think they're markedly different. But
But I just have a comment. If you compare them to the sorry, if you compare them to the INQUI filter or the Gearsing filter or prognostic reviews, then they're very different, in my opinion.
Which filters did you just mention,
Janne? It's a filter for prognostic reviews called INQUI, INGUI, that I have used in combination with the Gearsing filter.
And I think
you know about
the
these
prognostic models reviews, those
okay, that's
filters.
why. Yeah,
but
sorry,
I was looking for
them
those two filters as well, because they were the ones that I was the most familiar with. But I think they're prognostic models, which again, the complexity within prognostic studies is that you have to know exactly what review you're supporting to determine which filter to use, and then have a choice of filters within each.
Yeah,
makes it hard.
That's difficult, but we'll learn today, hopefully.
Yeah. let the learning continue.
So unless there are other, so unless there are other urgent questions on the methods, I suggest we move forward and discuss the results of the paper. So Robin, if you could maybe show figure 1, because this displays the results very nicely. Yeah, we'll just, at first we'll focus on this figure. So basically, the results of the first investigation they wanted to conduct, which is compare the search recall of the focused versus the broad search strategy. So they found that, and that's a really interesting finding, the focused search retrieved 1,332 records, and the broad search retrieved 15,242 records. So that's a big difference, important difference. So basically the focused search is a 90% reduction in the number of retrieved records. And if we look at figure 1, of 58 records they had included in their reference set, 35 were found by the focused search, and 53 were found by the broad search. So the precision of the focused search, of course, is much better than the broad search. Okay, so that's the first investigation they wanted to conduct in this paper. The second one, and that's a very interesting one, is related to the linking of the eligible studies to their origin. So which search method identified the 58 retrieved records? And yeah, for that, I think it's best to maybe move to figure 2. This is a really nice Venn diagram, and helps really in understanding their findings. So basically, they found that the focused primary study search, or sorry, I might go back to figure 1, because I think for understanding the paper, it's again very interesting to see what different types of methods they established. So we already talked about the focused search for primary studies and the broad search for primary studies. But they also tested a reference search in systematic reviews that were known to them. So basically, they took those systematic reviews and extracted relevant studies from them and established a small reference set. They used the supplementary methods, the supplementary search methods, which are hand searching, reference searching, forward searching, and personal files of the investigators. And then the one in the middle, the tools reference search. So this is the search, this is a different type of search. If I understood correctly, they used papers that provided information on potential prognostic factors for, I think, recovery expectations. I'm not sure. I'm summing this up. I'm summarizing this in the correct way, but this was a very, yeah, an interesting search method, I would say, which retrieved for additional studies. Okay, so these were the different search methods, and now I think we can move to figure 2, which visualizes the overlap of the search results from each component of the search strategy. So here again, they explain a bit better what this tool search was. It was the forward search of publications citing, identifying prognostic factors. Yeah, so I think I'll leave it at that because I'm not sure I totally understand what they did there. But they did some forward citation searching of specific publications that were of relevance to this review. Okay, and what you can see in figure 2 is basically that some of the search methods overlap and have an important overlap, but all search methods which they named supplementary, such as hand searching and all the other different things they consider supplementary, did not have any overlap at all with the other search methods. And if you move to figure 3, this figure, in addition to figure 2, also depicts the broad search, which identified 53 of the 58 studies. So if you look at that, and please note that they say it here, the figures are not mathematically proportional. So you have to look at the numbers and not so much at the geometrical forms, the size of the geometrical forms of this figure. But basically what you see is that the broad search for primary studies covers many of the studies identified via the other search methods. But of course, this circle should be much broader because, of course, it retrieves many other references and can't be really depicted here. But you can also appreciate that in addition to the broad search, hand searching still identified unique studies. The tool search, which is this search they call PF method search here, identified additional studies, and the systematic review reference search only identified additional studies. Still, you can see the broad search is quite sensitive. Okay, I think we'll move on and describe the other 2 search approaches they wanted to test. So what they also wanted to test was whether it would affect the meta-analysis if the studies identified via the supplementary search methods would have been excluded. And they present this data in table 2. And what you can see, and the authors think this is due to the fact that the effect is quite stable. So in this review topic, the effect is relatively prominent and stable. And this is why the searches that focused only on the classical search methods simply didn't change the direction of the effect, but basically the confidence intervals just become wider. So there's more uncertainty. And of course, if you include more studies, which happens when you use additional search methods, supplementary search methods, the confidence become more focused, and therefore less uncertainty in the meta-analysis. Okay. And the last method they wanted to check was the analysis of the prognosis filters. And this is where they used the different reference standard with the 272 citations. And you can see that in table 3. There they compare the performance of the filters. And I would actually say that at first sight, the first filter from Irvine and the fourth filter, the combined hedges and natural history filter, appear to perform very well. So you have a 90.4 sensitivity for Irvine, 90.1 sensitivity for the fourth filter, and the precision is comparable as well. The number needed to read slightly changes, but those two filters are the best, and they consider the Irvine filter to be of superior performance because it's a bit more precise than the combined hedges and natural history filter. Okay, so are there any questions related to the results before we move into the discussion section? Something that you didn't understand, something that you would like to point out, something that you found very interesting or surprising?
The thing I quite liked about this paper, which I've done a bit myself, if I can declare an interest here, is that it moved the paper forward by reanalyzing the meta-analysis and taking studies in and out as sensitivity analysis. It makes the paper more than just we did some searches and found more studies. It makes the paper we did some searches, found some more studies, and this is the impact of the searching. And I think these papers and this way of analyzing things is really valuable, because there's a lot of papers out there that just did a search differently and found more studies, but they don't explain why that's important. And that slightly undervalues the role of the searcher, to my mind, and it also doesn't really explain why it matters. So I like this paper, I've enjoyed reading it, and I'm very grateful for you pointing it out, Maria, but I valued this bit above all. I think it was really, really nicely done. And I've done it myself a number of times. It's a lot of work to pull in and pull out studies. I've done it a lot in qualitative reviews as well, where it's even more work. So just to say, I thought this was done really well, and it really helps the strength of the paper.
Thank you, Chris. I absolutely agree. And I have to add that they are very transparent that the effect seen here might only be valid to their topic, so might only apply for their topic, because, as I mentioned before, this is a very prominent effect, and they argue in the discussion section later on that in topics where the effect isn't so clear, you might see more differences when excluding studies from supplementary search methods. So I think they're being very transparent here about the effects that the supplementary search methods had on their own topic, but also saying, okay, this might not be applicable to other topics with less prominent effects.
And I completely agree with that. I think that's valuable. The other thing I think it really helps is that what we're very unclear about with prognosis searching and diagnostic searching is, have we got everything? You know, in some cases, particularly in strong intervention reviews where you can be quite certain, we're talking about the precision of the estimate of effect. Whereas here, what we're saying is we're not massively confident in the search. I mean, we're very confident, we're very transparent, etc., etc. You know, we have some confidence in the searches, but what this paper proves, and my experience of prognosis diagnostic reviews, is we're still quite uncertain whether we've got everything. So the transparency they put into the paper, but also the way they've moved stuff in and out of the meta-analysis to demonstrate that, begins to help strengthen the case to look at the uncertainty around the searching. And I think that, again, is quite valuable. It speaks to that we're not, you know, the case that we can't be too confident that we haven't got everything, but this is the kind of effect it makes if we have this pile or this pile or this pile to address our question, which is, again, very, very valuable in these kind of topics where we're kind of learning how to do these kind of searches because they're so new. So I think really would.
I just realized or thought about another thing that I find interesting, but it's probably hard to report or to even study, is we know how big the search result would have been if they had done a broader search, but we do not know how much they had to screen for the supplementary search processes. So they already found like 19 studies through the database search. So they would have screened all the reference lists of these studies. They apparently did forward citation tracking. They did some sort of hand searching. So it would be very interesting to know what the numbers retrieved by these search approaches would have been. I mean, I assume the number would be still much lower than the 15,000 retrieved by the broad database search, but still it's something that would have interested me.
Thank you, Irma. I think that's a very good point, because in the discussion they pick this up and they state that running a more focused search and putting more comprehensive efforts into supplementary search methods is the more efficient way to locate prognosis studies. So they make a very strong statement here, but we cannot really assess the efficiency gain because they didn't deliver this data in the paper. Maybe it becomes apparent from the supplementary material. I have to disclose, I didn't take a look at the supplementary material, but yeah, this is certainly something that would have been of interest. Yeah, thank you.
And we can't compute the efficiency data because they haven't tabulated their searching time, which is a common problem with these kind of papers. We need to know not only what they got and the different results overall, the screening results and all these kind of things, but we need to know how long they take to begin to derive effectiveness, efficiency, and cost values, which is a shame in this, because a lot of the big searches, you know, the 15,000, you can really begin to see the data more clearly when you articulate cost around how long it took to do this and the cost of A against B against C against D. So it's a shame that data is missing, because I think that would really bring home how complicated and different these are. And then when you've got the meta-analysis data, you can begin to see the cost effectiveness. We've looked at doing ICERs on this kind of stuff before, so you begin to sound the incremental cost ratios between the search approaches, and that would be a really interesting way to do it.
Thank you, Chris. Yes. And I think one point that I would like to come back to is, Robin, if you could move up to figure 2 again. Yes. So we've now seen that the broad search would have found 53 of 58 included studies, which is great, but would have cost a lot of screening time. But what I find very striking, it's really striking to me, that the hand searching techniques had absolutely no overlap with the other types of study identification methods. And that's a really interesting finding, I think, because I would have have expected the focused primary electronic database search and the hand searching to not overlap. But I would have expected the systematic review reference search to have an overlap with the hand searching methods. And in this case, there's no overlap at all. So that really makes a case for, builds a case for including hand searching methods. And of course, the problem of this paper is, in general, I would say, it's not a problem. It's just, it's a case report. It's a case report focusing on one topic. And this is also one of the points that they depict in their discussion, that basically I think this paper is of highly internal validity, but we can't really extrapolate whether this is applicable to other topics. So hand searching in other topics might not be as relevant or might not retrieve unique or only unique references compared to this topic. So this is a case report. It's very helpful. It's very thoroughly conducted, I think, even though it lacks some of the things that we would like to see. So time taken for searching and for screening and so on. But yeah, it's still only a case report, and the external validity of their findings are in question. Everyone seems to be thinking.
we're contemplating the challenge of these searches. I also was going to come back to figure 2. I'm glad you did, Marie-Anne. This is really surprising finding to me too. It suggests that if you didn't include this element of the search, or you didn't approach as a very, very broad search, which would be hard to justify to an author team, all that search or all that screening, that you would end up missing, a significant number of studies. So yeah, really important finding for a case report, and just something for us to be aware of. Just started thinking about how to, design a study that included more prognostic methods reviews, so that you could validate this. I think that's important for our field.
Any other comments on the results, on the paper? Ina?
I had a closer look on the search filters, and for me it's interesting this Irving and combined hedges with the highest sensitivity use more mesh terms than the others. So I think the indexing is not so bad for this, for prognostic now. Because normally when we started with a prognostic review, we said, no, you can't use mesh terms. There are nothing to find. There's no indexing for this at the moment. And yes.
That's really important.
Yeah, thank you.
I think noticed it too. Sorry, Maria, talking over you. I think we're saying the same thing, which is you're absolutely right. This Irving filter that had the best sensitivity has the most index terms, but one of their conclusions is that the indexing isn't strong enough. I mean, maybe it was that search didn't still capture everything, but yeah, is that what you would say too, Maria, that the index terms here, it does suggest in this Irving filter that they were working as intended. The indexing is operating as it should.
Yeah, so one thing that I like about Ina's remark here is that we can take a closer look at the actual subject headings that they use, and I wanted to point out that you could actually also approach a search for prognosis reviews by using cohort study filters. Because thinking from the epidemiology side of this, reviews focusing on prognosis will always make use of longitudinal studies. So, and these are the terms that are included here. So cohort studies, follow-up studies, we can see survival analysis, we can see in the other filter the term incidence and mortality. So except of mortality, all the other terms are associated with cohort studies. So when I was initially thinking about how to go on about the search for the Cochrane review, I supported is that I might also use a filter for cohort studies and try if that would help. So yeah, thank you for pointing it out that these study types, which are the ones that you would like to have and retrieve for this type of review question, are included here in the filters.
Should we move to discussion? Marianne, was that a section you wanted to talk about their discussion about the results?
Well, I think we already discussed several things that they discussed in their discussion. So I think we touched upon most of the arguments they make here. Maybe just to point out that some additional points they add here is that their findings might suggest that it may be unreasonable for searchers to expect that a single ideal prognosis filter can be created that can be applied in all prognosis searching contexts. So that's an interesting point they make in their discussion. And another interesting fact they mention or they discuss is that another search approach might consist in iterative searching, because they say terminology can vary very much from topic to topic, and using a more iterative search approach might have increased the sensitivity of the focused search without adding greatly to recall, and could have been very effective in this case. So that's also worth mentioning, I think. Yeah, and then I think in the last paragraph, they say something which has got me thinking, actually. Because first of all, they say future research on prognosis search methods could conduct a more rigorous and real-time comparison of traditional versus supplementary search methods. And well, my first thought was, well, even more rigorous. I think they're being very modest here, because I think this paper is very rigorous already. And then the real-time comparison. So when I first introduced this paper, I mentioned that usually all the information retrieval papers that we see conduct investigations based on retrospective analysis. And here they say, okay, people should, or researchers could do real-time comparisons of these search methods. So, wow, I think that's very ambitious. And I would really like to hear what other people in this call think about this conducting real-time comparisons of search methods. Have you ever seen something like that?
I think the problem is that this only works in case studies and only if you have a lot of time, basically, because you would need to prospectively have two search methods and then compare like the time it takes as well as everything else. And then you have to screen a larger amount of results because there might be different stuff found by different searches. So that is, yeah, I think one of the studies about objective search methods did something like that. They had in parallel people running traditional searches and doing their text analysis based search.
Yeah,
And
I was involved in that paper. I can talk about it. So this was a study led by the evidence-based practice centers, and they had usual practice searches versus text mining searching. And so there were two searches that were run and then compared, and it was feasible. And I think it's feasible here in what they propose for prognostic search methods as well. But it was a challenge. It was, you needed to tabulate all your search time, record all of those elements. And there was even a qualitative aspect where we had to record our feelings as we were running the searches and the experience of it. But challenging to design a study like that, but definitely feasible.
Thanks. Yeah, it's true. They are already out there, the real-time comparisons.
I did some qualitative work last year or this year, I can't remember when it was, but one of the data sets, well, some of the data to come out, that made a difference between experimental studies like this one and real life searching. And the answers we got were saying, well, this kind of experimental stuff is all very good and well, but you can only ever do it post hoc. And that it just doesn't compare to real life searching when you're in the moment, because you need a lot of the data that what should I call it? The pre and post data to make a lot of the comparisons that are used in traditional information retrieval. So I wasn't sure how live reporting would work as such. But I thought the distinction between experimental and real life was quite a significant thing in our little paper, and it reminded me a bit of that, the differences between what we're doing day to day and these kind of things. I've got to drop out, but thank you very much everybody for this, and Maria and T for presenting, and Robin for organising.
Yeah,
I'll say goodbye.
thanks, Chris, for joining. Bye now. We are reaching the end of the time. I have one question. Hopefully we have time for this. I always ask about the implications for our work. And this is a really tricky one, because my real question is, how should we approach these searches based on this case report? I don't think we can make any firm conclusion, but I don't know, Maria and T, what were any important lessons that you learned from this paper that we can apply when we're doing these kinds of searches?
Yeah, lessons learned. So lessons learned, or maybe facts that we were already aware of but were reinforced by the findings of this paper are definitely, I would say, that supplementary search methods are really required in prognosis related searches. So this is definitely the take-home message for me, the main take-home message. And this also means for us as information retrieval specialists that probably for this type of reviews, we will have to communicate more with the team, with the review authors. We have to maybe ask them, can you provide us with references already known to you? Do you have personal files that we can use? And maybe also the question on how much of the supplementary search methods should be conducted by the information specialists versus by the team themselves. So could you divide the work and say, okay, the information specialists conduct the traditional highly sensitive database searches or a focused search, for example, and it's the author's task to conduct the additional search methods, maybe also because they're already knowledgeable in this field. So yeah, these are the 2 points that I would like to take home from this paper. Anyone else?
I agree with you. I think those are the most important things. And I guess the question about splitting up the search tasks also leads to a question about documentation, because I trust myself to document things properly. I do not trust review authors to do so. And that might lead to some blank spots when it comes to supplementary searching.
I think with the guidance of the information specialist, was particularly on documentation. It's a good point.
And maybe the last lesson learned is you probably have to allocate much more time for these reviews, for the search, conducting the searches of these reviews. Probably if you are approached to support one of those reviews, definitely make a case for the time that will probably need to be allocated to conduct a proper search.
And that's such an important implication for our work. Thank you, Marie-Antti. This was just an excellent paper and an excellent discussion. Thanks to everyone for joining. And yeah, for facilitating, Marie-Antti. This was just fantastic. So thanks, everyone. I hope you enjoy the rest of your week and your weekend, if you have a long weekend in the UK especially. And yeah, we'll be in touch about our next journal club. I'm already thinking we should ask Robin Painter to talk about her study where she did the prospective analysis of different search methods. That'd be really interesting to have another guest methodologist join us. So thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.